Okay, hello everybody. Today's guest is Dr. Lisa Hinkelman, the founder and CEO of ROX, Ruling Our Experience. It's a national nonprofit organization dedicated to the research and programming for girls' confidence, leadership, and decision making. Definitely a cause close to my heart. Dr. Hinkelman is a former professor in counselor education at The Ohio State University, and she spent nearly 2 decades studying the real and lived experiences of girls in schools across the country. Through large scale research initiatives, ROX's evidence based school programs, her work has reached tens of thousands of girls nationwide. She's the author of Girls Without Limits, and her research and insights have been featured in outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Newsweek, and USA Today. Her work sits at the intersection of data, education, and practical skill building for resilience, agency, and leadership in girls. Dr. Hinkelman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. You've spent years studying the girls' lived experiences. What originally pulled you into the work?
Yeah, I similar to you, I had an experience in an all female environment. I went to a women's college, Chatham in Pittsburgh, and I think it was kind of like my first exposure to really looking critically at the issues that were facing girls and women. I had a psychology of women class that
Mm,
really inspired me and just had these like light bulbs go off that motivated me to want to do work with girls and women, and actually motivated me to want to become a counselor. And so
mm.
as I came to graduate school and really kept my focus centered around the issues that were facing girls and then ultimately how those issues impacted who we become as women, I I I began to have a sense that I needed to do something and I needed to figure out how to do something earlier in girls' lives when they were young, when they were malleable, while they were just beginning to form their sense of self.
Yeah.
And so it was that early work that just kind of got things going for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I had an experience not only going to an all-girls high school, but later working in an all-girls high school and seeing the difference from a co-ed education prior to that and after that. So it was really eye-opening, and even being exposed to the research as to how an environment like that can really change a person's confidence. Tell me a little bit, what are some of the most concerning trends you're seeing today in girls' confidence and belief right now?
Yeah, one of the things that we do at ROX is large scale national research. And so
Mm,
we partner with schools across the country to do an anonymous and voluntary survey called the Girls Index. And it allows us to capture the beliefs and the attitudes and the thoughts of thousands and thousands of girls. Our most recent survey surveyed over 17,000 girls. And so
wow.
we're able to have this like nationally representative sample, but it can tell us specifically like where girls are struggling, where they're thriving, what we need to pay attention to. And I think one of the things that we're seeing that has holding true over time is that there's a significant confidence decline in girls between 5th and ninth grade, and it
Mm,
doesn't recover. And that to me is so troubling because starting at age 10, girls start to question their value. They start to
mm,
question their
yeah.
voice and whether their opinions matter, and their own, not just their sense of worth, but their sense of competence and who and what they can become in the world.
Mhm,
And so we're really looking at how these beliefs then intersect with the decisions that girls make. Are they holding
mm,
themselves back from
mhm.
taking chances, taking difficult courses, pursuing the dream careers because they question whether they're worthy or whether they can do it? I have a belief that the confidence that we hold is so central to all of our decision making. And if we can impact girls' confidence in a profound way, we can make girls who are more competent, but also who move through the world making better decisions.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because confidence is something that, if it's true confidence, it allows you to take smart risks. It allows you to make mistakes, right? But you believe you'll recover or you can learn from the mistake and move forward. Any thoughts or anything you found on what's contributing to this decline in confidence between age 10 and high school?
Yeah, I think there's such a complex answer to that question. I think
Mm,
so often we want to be like, "Oh, well, it's social media," or "Oh, it's this or that." And I think the reality is that this confidence decline was happening well before social
yeah.
media was even part of girls' lives. I think we've seen
Although
some of the
social media has helped.
pardon?
Social media has helped.
Oh, I mean, I'm not, I think social media has added a complexity, right? It's
Mhm.
amplified the challenges for girls and has made the insecurities more profound, has made the tough even harder in so many ways.
Mm,
But I think it's kind of like this perfect storm in the sense of there are the hormonal and biological changes that girls are experiencing during adolescence, right? And that
yeah,
changes the ways that they process and manage their emotions, and their bodies are changing in ways that maybe they like and maybe they don't. And at the same time, during those years is where the messages from peers become uh, louder and more important in some ways than the
yeah,
messages from their nuclear family or from their parents. And so part of all of that is developmentally appropriate. But when the messages that are coming in that then have increased value are negative, restricting, demeaning, it makes sense why girls start to question themselves. They start to dislike their bodies more. They start to have more conflict in their relationships, and in some cases, they compromise who they
mhm,
are or what they believe for the acceptance of their peers.
yeah.
And I think all of those things coming together can create a complicated environment that can impact girls' confidence, and that is tricky for them to navigate.
What have you found is the biggest gap between girls' actual capabilities and what they believe that they're capable of?
I think there's a huge gap between what girls can
Mm,
do and what they believe they can do. Because I think what our data has proven is that even the most competent girls still question their abilities. So one of the
mhm.
data points that we saw was that girls with a 4.0 grade point average or higher, right? Because now you can get a
A
4.8,
5.0,
with
yeah,
weighted
right.
classes and all of that. So girls with these really tremendously high grade point averages, 40% of those girls still questioned if they were smart enough for their dream job.
Wow,
So
yeah,
it's kind of like their competence does not necessarily is not necessarily reflected in their confidence. And I think
right.
that tends to be one of those stats that when I have the chance to talk to folks or parents or educators, that is sort of startling because there's often the sense that like if she's academically capable
Mm,
and if she's doing well, then she obviously has confidence. Or
right,
we think like I look at this girl like the total package and she's got it all going on. And she doesn't see herself the way that we see her.
yeah.
And so that I think is illuminating of who is at risk. Because I think so often there's this sense of who needs confidence building, who needs extra supportive activities, who needs social and emotional learning competencies. And we have a sense that academically capable or thriving girls don't need that extra support when our data would actually show they very much still do.
Yeah, I suspect so, because often in those high achievers, there's a degree of perfectionism, and perfect can often become the enemy of good,
Yeah.
which is a problem where you start to develop this idea that your self worth is tied to your performance or your outcomes. In my first book, What's Your Everest, I talk about setbacks and mistakes as being part of the climb. How do girls today interpret setbacks? What really determines whether those setbacks build or erode their confidence?
I think we're living in a moment where setbacks, which are often messing up, not being perfect, in some ways, the idea of failing are avoided at all costs. Like that
Mm,
healthy risk taking is something that isn't happening with the level of frequency that it should be happening for healthy growth. I think right now girls are under so much scrutiny, right? Where they feel like they're being watched constantly, like everyone has a comment on what they're doing, what they look like. Because I think the lens of social media means that you're constantly under the gaze of others, right? And
yeah.
constantly looking for the approval of others. And that messing up isn't something that just happens privately, it happens often very publicly. And
Oh,
so the
yeah.
chance
And
that,
lingers forever,
and
right?
it
It
lingers,
doesn't go
yeah.
away. Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And so I think while many educators and counselors and social workers are often talking about growth mindset and failing fast and failing forward, and we want to cultivate that in this generation so that we're creating resilient humans. I think the reality is that there's very few spaces that feel safe to fail or to mess up. And so I think girls are feeling like they're always being recorded, like whatever they do can go on blast quickly, and then that sticks with them. And so they feel like they have to curate so many different aspects of their life, and then what they're posting or what they're
Hmm.
sharing has to present this certain kind of image. And so I think part of that is we have to help create safe places for them to fail or to mess
Yeah.
up or to
Hmm.
not get it right. And I don't think we do that with enough regularity that it becomes
Yeah.
a habit for them.
Yeah, there's a lot of these messages, right? In academia, even very much the focus is on the GPA you have as opposed
Mhm,
to what you've learned.
mhm,
Or take the Olympics, for example, some of the criticisms that comes from the very unathletic public that is judging these athletes that maybe got a silver medal or
mhm,
even when Simone Biles pulled out of Tokyo, one person called her un-American for doing that, and that kind of message that you're not allowed to take care of yourself, you're not allowed to have a moment of struggle, certainly not publicly. You can't
mhm.
make mistakes, or there will be really this public humiliation of some sort.
Yeah, and I think none of us want to feel put on
No,
the spot like that. None of us want to,
never.
like, we're not raising our hands to say I can't wait to fail because I'm going to learn from it, but we're
Right.
we're trying to
Yeah.
convince kids that they should do that. And so I
Right.
I do feel like the stakes are high for this generation in a different way than they were for previous. And that idea of failing, I think we have to reword that too, because who's truly
Mm,
wants to sign up to fail? And
right.
even
Yeah.
though we know it's part of the journey and it's part of what will help us grow, I mean, can we just talk more about, like, we're iterating, or we're learning as we go, or we're changing our mind, or we're doing things differently? Because I don't think there's a lot of people that want to sign up for failure.
Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
how we package that for young people, I think matters. And the one thing that we talk a lot about in our work at Rocks is creating those environments of safety. They don't just happen. You
Yeah.
have to
Hmm.
actually invest in the cultivation of a safe place. And that means that it's free from distractions. That means it's free from tech if it needs to be, that no one's recording me, that the
Hmm.
other girls who I'm sharing time with aren't having side conversations or rolling their eyes or
Hmm.
talking about me outside of this program. And creating that shared sense of trust and ownership over the space is the environment that I need to try something or to get it wrong because I know you're still going to be cheering me on. You're not going to be
Mhm.
filming me and putting me on blast. You're not going to be talking about me and how I didn't do it right when we leave. And I think that the time that it takes to create those environments is often not invested in the girls'
Yeah.
environments that we have. And so we expect them to be vulnerable in spaces that don't honor their vulnerability.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think that's on us as the parents, as the educators, as the counselors who are helping them cultivate these skills to ensure that we're doing our due diligence to create those spaces and environments for them to actually grow.
I know that some schools have adopted these social emotional learning initiatives or even curricula. And initially, when I was exposed to this, being a psychologist, I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I have to say, I have not been very impressed with uh, what the results are. I don't know that there are any results, or even maybe things have gotten worse. I'm not sure. Some of the things I hear about, I'm shocked how the kids are talking and talking to one another. Are there aspects of school culture that most strongly shape girls' sense of agency and self trust?
Yeah, what we've experienced is that increasing a sense of belonging at school is really important for girls, and that right now we live in a moment where only about like 39% of girls would say that school is a place where they feel like they belong or that people care about them. About
Wow.
the same percent say that they can be themselves at school.
Uh huh.
So I think when we think that the majority of girls aren't finding their educational environment to be a place where they are welcomed, belong, connected, it makes all the other work of school more complicated. And in my mind, creating a belonging environment, a safe environment where people know I'm there and care that I'm there is one of the easiest educational things to do, right?
Yeah.
It's 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 what the educators are adding to their environment to make students feel seen and to make them feel like who they are is welcome in this place.
Hi, everyone. What's your Everest? We all have a mountain we're trying to climb. My book here, What's Your Everest? How to Win in Sports, Career, and Life While Enjoying the Ascent, is here to help you with your journey to the top while enjoying the climb. It's written for both teens and adults who are looking to grow, push themselves, and believe bigger. It's available on Amazon. And if you find this book is helpful to you, even with one step up the mountain, I'd truly be grateful for your review. Keep climbing. You've got this.
And so we know that when girls have that, like adults that they can trust at school, a place of supportive belonging, they want to be there.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
I feel like that's a troubling statistic, but also hopeful in that that's something we can change, right? That's
Yeah.
something
Hmm.
universally that adding on more support, more engagement, creating an environment that is more caring, that's something we can easily do, way easier than we can control how the girls or the students come to the school environment, right? We can't
Hmm.
control if their parents were up all night fighting. We can't control if
Right.
they had a hot
Hmm.
meal before they got here. We can't control if they're experiencing violence in their neighborhood or interpersonally. Like there's a lot of stuff we can't control, but how they feel when they get there is something that we
Hmm.
can. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes that's the challenge of the school environment is that you have some thinking that like school is academics only and that
Hmm.
we just
Right.
focus
Yeah.
on teaching the academic content. And yet like students are complex individuals like we all are, and
Hmm.
creating environments that help nourish their emotional competence makes them want to be there so they can learn.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's an issue of we we have to just focus on academics, and if we don't do that we're never going to get ahead or we're going to lose the race to something. I think it's when we remove the barriers, um, the non-academic barriers, then we can have a better pathway to more rigorous academic learning because the students are there, they want to be there, and they're engaged.
Yeah, I mean, something I say to people very often is like, if you're really activated, really angry, is that the best time for you to take a math test? You know, you probably won't perform at your best. So the
Yeah.
more we can build kind of a curiosity, let's say, to introspect and consider what's going on with us, and are we able to put it aside in order to take this math test, or do we need to vent somewhere or get some kind of support? And obviously the peer environment could be very supportive of that if it is shaped to be that way.
Yeah, and I think that what we're seeing a trend, unfortunately, away from is supporting the mental health and emotional and well-being needs of students in schools. And I think that's troubling, right? Because I do think that students need those professionals in their school buildings, right? We need to invest in school counselors and school social workers, not to
Mhm.
replace parents, not to replace other
Yeah, right.
resources, but to walk
Mhm.
alongside in the educational program of the students. And I think right now we're seeing ratios that are wild, right? If you have 450 students to one counselor, or in some
Oh yeah.
spaces 800 students to one student support service person, it's
Right.
hard to be able to really scratch the surface on that. And I think those opportunities to think complexly about the whole child and what they need in such in an educational environment is one of the things that is something we have to pay attention to and think about and
Yeah.
determine how we get all of these needs met in an environment that is complicated.
What about from your research, not from the headlines? What
Yeah.
role is social media actually playing in shaping girls' identity and risk tolerance? I mean, we also have this infiltration of technology and the web and probably social media and other apps and things like that into the school day, not
Mhm.
just in the passing periods, but also classrooms are using it. So, what have you found?
So we did the Girls Index research in 2017. That was our first round of that data collection. And then we replicated it again 5 years later. And then we looked at what was different. One of the things that we found was that the biggest uptick in social media use happened amongst the youngest girls, the fifth,
Yeah.
sixth, and seventh graders.
Uh-huh.
And actually, the fifth graders were specifically the highest. So in 2017, 9% of fifth graders said that they spent 6 or more hours each day using social media.
Oh my God.
In 2023, 40% of 5th graders said they spend 6 or more hours a day using social media.
How does
So
anyone have the time for this?
I
Yeah,
know,
it's
right?
incredible. Yeah.
But then what we saw was that group, those 5th grade girls, were also the ones that experienced the steepest increases in sadness and depression,
Mhm.
and the drop in confidence, right? So for so long, all of the data coming out around social media was correlational, right? This happened, and we're relating those together. And I think now we're starting to see, because it's been enough time, we're starting to be able to say what's causational.
Yeah.
And so what we do see is that that increase in social media use, the girls like their bodies less.
Mhm.
They have less healthy relationships with other girls.
Mhm.
And they have increases in stress and pressure and mental health challenges. They also reported like such significant variance in their number of days per week sad and depressed.
Mhm.
So the fifth, sixth, and seventh graders had the steepest increase also in the number of days per week they reported sadness and depression. So there is again like something that is happening here, right? Is
Yeah.
almost the data that we would have previously saw for ninth, eighth, and ninth graders, we're now seeing for fifth and sixth graders. And that's where I think we need to turn our heads a bit and not think like, oh, well, elementary school is easy breezy and the real problems start in middle school and high school. I think we're starting to see the challenges start earlier for girls, which means we have to turn our attention to the the elementary age girls, and
Yeah.
see that this is where they're exposed to new things at a higher rate than ever before, right? Their access to technology and social media has given them access to content that is developmentally inappropriate, and
Mhm.
um, and that is in many ways making them older younger.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was frightened to learn that, the algorithms actually purposefully send these negative messages in order to create more consumption, and so there's a terrible influence there.
Yeah, and I
You know,
think
I
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, that this generation of parents, like, we didn't have the chance to know necessarily what the impacts of technology and social media were going to be.
Right.
And because we weren't digital natives, we adopted it and came alongside. And so, you know at the earliest times, it's like, well, we didn't know how to tell our kids to put their phones away or not get right into it. And I think this generation was almost a social experiment when it came to technology and social media use, and now we're seeing the implications of that and the results of that. And I think that's why we're now starting to see some regulating and some reckoning, that is, I think, critically important for helping kids develop positive and healthy relationships, a strong sense of self, good mental health, like all of the things they need to thrive.
Yeah, yeah. I recently also published a book on a growth mindset and how environments can really invite or shut down risk taking, with, in the face of social media where so much about you can get curated or posted about you against your will.
Mhm.
Um, what really does a growth oriented environment look like today in practice for girls in a way where it functions well?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I think I'm still trying to sort that through, and in the work that we do, because I feel like you just illuminated a lot of the complexities of creating a safe environment, right? What does it look like and how can we do it? I wish I had a great answer for that. And I'm curious of how you're approaching that work and that conversation with girls, because right now I feel like girls are are feeling under so much pressure
Hmm.
that, like, 79% of girls in our study said that they feel like they're under so much pressure they're going to explode.
Wow. Wow.
So when I think about that, and then trying to challenge them to develop a growth mindset when they're feeling like little pressure cookers, that
Hmm.
feels like a hard thing to tease out. And
Yeah.
and so that's where I think what we know works is the investment in these environments and the ability to curate these safe and supportive environments for girls, and also helping parents create those kind of environments for their girls and their family, places where
Mhm.
girls can talk openly, where they don't feel judged, where they don't feel shut down, also where they don't feel like if they bring a concern or a problem, that the adult is just going to try to solve it for them, or question why
Mhm.
they did
Right.
what they did. So I think for us it's about how we create those environments in educational settings, but then also how we help the adults in girls' lives curate those
Yeah.
environments for themselves, so they have that in their families, so that when girls come home from a stressful day at school or in their sport or whatever, they have a soft place to land, knowing that their their parents, their caregivers, their coaches are looking also to create those environments that are free from judging eye rolling or solving the problems when the girl just wants listened to. And
Yeah.
so for
Yeah,
us,
that's a
it's
big
like
one.
work with the girls and try to work within her ecosystem so
Yeah.
that we're sending her back to classrooms and families and teams that are also reinforcing the kinds of things that we're working on teaching her in rocks programs.
The other thing that I have seen and found is sort of on the other side where girls can be afraid, even women can be afraid of being too shiny, that they are too successful and therefore somebody else is going to feel bad, maybe their brother or something like that, and
Mhm.
helping girls in general across the board develop what in sports we call the killer instinct, where, when you compete at your highest level, it's actually the most respectful thing you can do. I'm not saying dirty competition, but compete to your fullest capacity. And when you prepare your best, when you perform at your best, you're really showing somebody else what they can aspire to, as opposed to holding yourself back. So
Mhm.
that's something that I talk a lot about with girls, and certainly the athletes that I end up working with, who are, they do get into this funk of thinking that they can't make any mistakes. I will often point out to some of their idols, whether it be Michael Jordan or Scotty Scheffler or Caitlin Clark or something, who has said something really profound on how they have embraced failure. And when they do get to that point where sometimes it's like, well, just take this tournament or just take this test, where I want you to see how you do when you don't go all out. You just don't worry about it. Don't study, don't over prepare. Just do your regular nothing special. And all the pressure is gone, that they do really well. Um, and embracing that feeling, it takes practice, but embracing that feeling, like you don't always have to push so far beyond your limits. Sometimes, or a lot of times, we perform a lot better when we're free to compete instead of pushing ourselves to compete. It takes a lot of mental energy and brain space to be
Mhm.
so hard on yourself. Shifting gears to adults, though, I want to ask you,
Yeah.
adults often make missteps despite being well intentioned. Uh, your programs are evidence based and they're used at scale. Any specific skills or practices that produce the biggest real world gains in confidence and resilience?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've learned and that one of the things we talk to adults about is that making sure that girls of course have these environments where they can learn and grow and thrive, but also that we're focused on opportunities to build their competence and confidence by them having chances to practice and
Mhm.
try things out and learn the behaviors and use them. I think sometimes we see a trend towards folks really wanting to compliment girls and just tell them
Mhm.
how great they are all the time. And sometimes parents think like if I just tell, I just I pour
Right,
into them by telling them they you can do anything and you're so
right.
great and you're so smart and you're so beautiful. And we know that that doesn't do anything and sometimes has a
Mm.
negative impact. Is that,
Yeah, right.
that external praise gets you conditioned to receive external praise. It
That,
doesn't
and
make
think
you
that you have to live up to it all the time, right?
exactly,
If
exactly.
I'm so
And
great, why am I failing?
yes. And I will get so invested in being great that I won't do the hard thing because I might not be
Yeah,
great at it.
right.
I'll take the
Yeah,
easier path. And so I think creating those environments for the challenge and then supporting through the challenge is the way that we then experience ourselves differently. Doing something hard that we didn't think we could do,
yeah,
achieving, right? Feeling my body do something that I didn't think it could do, saying something hard to somebody that I didn't think I could say, standing up for
yeah,
myself, saying no, I don't like that.
yeah,
I need you to stop. Like all of those things that actually require practice to build competence are the things that ultimately build confidence. And so those are the kinds of things that we encourage all the adults in girls' lives to give them those opportunities and those spaces and not just rely on, I always tell her that she is so smart and so pretty.
Yeah.
That's not gonna do it, right? And and I think for this generation of girls, I mean, appearance is so important. I think it's always been a point of like an issue, right? I think we've always
Yeah. Right.
overemphasized the value of appearance for girls and women, and and that also contributes to low confidence. And now that we are comparing real girls and real women to AI generated, to all of the things that are just so unrealistic, like
Uh-huh.
there's a connection there too. And so
Yeah.
when we do see that girls who have a greater acceptance of their body are also likely to report higher levels of confidence, right? So
Yeah.
there's an intersection there that I think matters, and I think that the appearance related anxiety and stress that girls experience is probably at an all-time high right now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because sometimes you see a group of girls walking to school and they don't go to a school that requires uniforms and yet they're all dressed exactly the same. Or sometimes kids go in the total opposite direction and they stand out so much on purpose. But all of it is like trying to figure out, how do I fit in? Who am I? Am I okay as I am? Um, can I be confident in the clothes I've chosen, even if they're somewhat different from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
it's
for teens that matters, right?
yeah,
They're one of the developmental kind of milestones is differentiating
mhm,
myself from my family and from my parents, differentiating myself from my peers and figuring out where I fit in and who I am. That's we expect that. That is something that we would expect to happen during the adolescent years. And so we should know that that is what's going to happen. But I think one of the things that we often err on as adults is we'll be like, you shouldn't care. You shouldn't care what those
yeah,
people think. Why do you care what those girls say? They're mean
mhm,
anyway. Or who cares if she
right,
and that I think is one of the things that can disconnect us from the young people
yeah,
in our lives
mhm.
because they
Well, it's
do
not
care.
validating their
It's
experience, yeah.
not
Why do you just
validating.
turn off caring?
Yeah, yeah,
Calm
or
down, relax. It never
right, yeah,
works.
that never works, right? Exactly. The more you tell me to calm down, the angrier and
The
more
angry I'm
riled up I
getting,
get.
yeah,
Yes. And I think that's the
yeah,
same thing. Is like, who cares what those girls think? Well, she
yeah,
does. And letting her know, like, yeah, that did hurt and that doesn't feel good. And let's
mhm,
talk about it. And let's talk about why it matters so much to you. Instead of just knowing, because when we say like you shouldn't care about that, she's done telling us about that then. She's not going
uh-huh,
to
yeah,
come to us to share that she got left out of the group chat or that something bad happened because she knows we've already judged it as not mattering.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and then we
right,
lose that chance for the connection and the opportunity to influence the skills that she could develop. One of the questions that we ask girls is, what do you need from the adults in your life? And we
mhm,
ask that in our survey. So 17,000 girls. And the number one most frequently occurring theme was listen to me. They truly want relationships with adults where they're listened to, they're believed, that what they have to say is important, and that they're not being judged for their opinions or their perspective, told it's stupid, told they shouldn't
mhm,
care. So that aspect of listening and validating, even if we don't agree with it, even
right,
if we
yeah,
have a different perspective,
mhm,
like she just initially wants to be heard. and
mhm,
and I think if we could shift our mindset to listening to understand versus listening to respond, it creates more space for connection. And even though later on we might say like, hey, do you want me to think with you about how we might solve
right,
this, or are you looking for solutions here, or you just want me to
right,
listen? I think that shift just creates such a sense of safety if we just take a beat to know
mhm,
I'm just here to take this in. She doesn't need me to react. She doesn't need me to overreact. She doesn't need me to solve it. She just is looking for connection. And I think that is sound advice for any adult that has a girl in her life, whatever role that you're in. If you're
Mhm.
a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, that opportunity to listen. It's simple in theory.
Yeah.
It's complicated in practice.
I did an exercise specifically on this actually with a group of teenage girls, and they ranged from 14 to 19. And the instruction was they got into pairs, and each one was supposed to tell the other a dilemma that they had that they wanted to complain about. The other one was instructed just to repeat back the dilemma to make sure it was correctly understood.
Yeah.
Then they were to empathize, like, oh, that does suck, but
Hmm.
not anything else. And then just ask, well, what have you tried already? What do you want to do about it? And be kind of supportive in the brainstorming of it, but not give any solutions. And what was so fascinating, because this was a weekend with young golfers, and there were so many different golf activities, and normally that's what they all gravitate to, but this exercise was their favorite of the whole weekend, which is noteworthy because even kids don't listen to each other. They just say, well, you should just break up with him, or you just shouldn't care about that. And we are so solution focused. We want it, it's like we can't tolerate another person's distress. um,
Hmm.
I mean, if they're on fire, please put them out. But when it is just something that can take a moment to listen, to support, empathize, again, like you said, you don't have to agree, but empathy doesn't require agreement. It just requires saying, yeah, I hear you. That I wouldn't like that if that were happening. Most people don't like that, or that sounds challenging. That's all it
Yeah.
really takes.
And I think it's so important to highlight that these are learned skills too. Listening
Yeah.
is a skill that we have to learn, right? Like
Yeah.
we go to graduate school to become counselors and psychologists, and we
Yeah.
have a whole class on communication, right? To
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to summarize the content or reflect the feeling or make sure that the other person feels heard and understood. Those are things that we learn in graduate school, right? But for most, listening is just assumed to be something that people know how to do.
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
love the fact that you did that exercise because you break those communication skills down into concrete bites that I can
Right.
conceptualize, get my head around, and practice. Then it makes me feel like I can actually learn how to be better at it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think when we have the chance to make those kinds of things skill deficits instead of personality deficits,
Yeah.
right? Then it's like, "Oh, I can get better at that."
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and that feels hopeful. That feels like, "Oh, I can become a better listener," not just like, "I'm terrible at that." Okay, well,
Right.
we can break it
Mhm.
down in ways that can help you be better. And that's a real gift, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a gift we can give to somebody else, is just listen for a minute. Because you're right. Most of us don't. And, you have this research in girls. I will tell you, the adults feel the same way. Nobody listens, you
Nobody
know.
listens. Yeah.
What about when you talk about leadership development in girls? What does that actually look like day to day?
Ooh, this is one of those areas that I think there continue to be super parallels between what girls experience and what women experience, and the perceptions that actually persists. So what we found in our research is that girls are shy away from leadership because they don't want people to think they're bossy.
Mhm.
Um, and they also don't speak their mind or disagree with others because they want to be liked. And
Yeah.
the majority of girls report both of those things. And when I take this data to groups of women, I have the chance to talk to like a lot of corporate BRGs or groups of women's leaderships cohorts and circles and that sort of thing. And they're like, "Well, I still feel that way." Right? I
Mhm.
still sometimes don't say what I'm thinking,
Mhm.
because I don't want to be the dissenter at the table, or I always put some sugar on what I'm going to say because I don't want
Oh,
people
yeah.
to call me bossy or other b words.
Other B words, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think those ideas start for us very early and are based on our
Mhm.
experiences, because while girls will say, like, they're reporting that, but they're also reporting that they hear that they're too much, that they're too
Yeah.
loud, that they're too opinionated. And so it's
Mhm.
not just their perception, it's also their experience.
Yeah.
And I think there's there's still a mismatch, between traits of leadership and gendered expectations, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that can continue to hold girls back because we tell girls to be strong, but not too strong, and we tell
Not
them
too
to
strong, yeah.
have a voice but don't be too
Like,
loud, like make
yeah.
it, put soften it up a bit. Or we tell them that they could be smart but you have to also be pretty. It's just like
Yeah.
these, we
But not
always,
too much of either one, because that's
yeah,
gonna be threatening to somebody. I mean, it's like the Barbie movie, right? There are
yeah,
these boundaries you have to stay in, not too
right.
much and not too little.
Yep. Yep. Oh yeah, that
Mhm.
monologue got so much play. And I think,
Mhm.
as we talk to girls and women, even though the opportunities have exceeded, previous opportunities for girls and women in many ways, they're still feeling that push and pull and these like juxtaposed ideas that I have to be both, and I have to be enough
Mhm.
but not too much. I have to be,
Mhm.
um I could be athletic, but I also have to be sexy. I can be and I just think
Right.
that's like a constant whiplash that
Yeah.
that our girls are experiencing.
There's a great book about that called "Does Woman Exist?" Have you come across that book?
No, tell me.
Oh, it's fascinating. I forget where it was written by a man, and he even writes about it in the beginning, like, I know, this is written by a man, but nobody else was writing it. So I did it. And he talks about the messages, right, in Reader's Digest and the cover of magazines, um, and talking about how women are kind of being handed an identity that is asking them to either, yeah, be a sexy virgin essentially, and or they need to like have it all, right? That, and these are things that are really difficult to attain. And because there's a little bit of a shorter history in the working world, the identity has been developed by these magazines, and not by an internal development of who am I and who do I really want to be, and what kind of, like, at the top when we were talking about what are my values and how do I stick to my values in a way that I feel good about.
Hmm.
Hopefully they don't alienate me, but these are the values I'm willing to be alienated over. So
Hmm.
but having those spaces to have those conversations, like, what hill would you die on and which ones are you willing to give up? So,
Yeah.
and that really does go into that whole leadership sphere, right? Because leaders really need to be the ones that are ethical and outspoken when it needs to be, and assertive, and you've got to be ambitious. There's a lot of decision making that goes into it. So, um, yeah, girls learning about that, and boundaries and communication, resilience under pressure.
Yeah, and I
That's
think some of it is in part of when girls need to believe that their voice is as important as everybody else's in the room, right?
yeah,
And
right,
not, it doesn't need to be more important, but it's certainly
right,
not less important. And I think that's a that's a hard convincing, I think, for many
yeah,
girls, because they're waiting to see what others say and do, or they don't want to be the voice of dissension, or they know that if they don't go along with something or somebody, that they'll be called out, they'll be put on blast, they'll be
yeah,
uninvited, isolated. And I think, let's be honest, they see that from adults in the world too, is that having a dissenting voice or not agreeing can put you into a place that you don't want to be. And I think when we see such polarizing behaviors from adults in the world, telling girls to speak their mind and that their voice and their opinion matter, um, can be counter to what they're actually seeing happening. Because when people do disagree, there's very little opportunity for respectful disagreement or
Hmm.
dialogue that is dissenting but still respectful. And so I think sometimes we're asking girls to do things that they're not necessarily seeing role modeled well, and we're asking them to be brave and have brave conversations, but knowing that the implications of that could be great.
Yeah. I think that is where some of those single gender environments are useful because um, it takes one level of pressure off uh, for most of the girls anyway. And maybe they won't be worried in that moment. Are they looking cute enough? Or is it okay to speak their mind? It also changes, of course, the adults, right? You can't inadvertently, unconsciously only call on or mostly call on boys in math and science and mostly call on girls in art and literature, right? That goes away. And then there is that opportunity to raise your hand and speak up more often and build that confidence. Are there other concrete practices adults can start using immediately to help girls step into leadership?
I think one of the other things that we tend to focus on a lot is helping girls manage conflict and develop assertive communication skills.
Hmm.
So often I hear things like, oh, girls are so much drama, or there's so much girl drama at my school, or, these girls are just, they're so mean to each other. And
Uh-huh.
and I think that that relational aggression that we see happen between and among girls and women is founded and rooted in the fact that we don't teach effective conflict management to girls
Yeah.
and effective,
Or
assertive, and
anyone.
healthy
Mhm.
communication. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so instead of, what we see is that instead of saying, like, hey, like, that totally hurt my feelings when you did that, or, when you posted that on Instagram, I didn't like it. I need you to take it down.
Mhm.
Sharing the way I actually feel with a friend can feel too threatening or too scary. And so instead, I'll just have a passive response, or a
Yeah.
passive aggressive response.
Yeah.
And that just enhances and increases the conflict, and it damages the relationship. And so what we see is that most girls have never had a conversation about assertive communication. They've
Mhm.
never learned the difference between passive aggressive, assertive, and passive aggressive. And they've
Yeah.
never had the chance to practice those skills.
Yeah.
And so we really center our relationship cultivation and identifying healthy and cultivating healthy relationships in learning effective communication and learning how to set boundaries and stand up for myself, learning how to
Mhm.
share with you when I don't agree with something or something was unkind, and thwart the idea that confidence and kindness can't happen at the same time.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so I think that is something that all of us can role model for girls and help them do, because many of us as grown-ups still struggle with assertive communication and
Mhm.
telling
Yeah.
somebody something that they don't want to hear, or that is hard, or that is
Mhm.
feedback. and
Mhm.
and so we'd rather just like let it go, and then we get mad at ourselves, right? Because, oh, I
Right.
can't believe that happened and I didn't say anything. And we let it go, and we get less mad at that person but more mad at us, of like, why
Mm.
didn't I do something, why didn't I say
Yeah.
something? And I think we have this chance to show girls what healthy, kind assertiveness can look like by the ways that we move through the world, and then help her have the opportunities to practice that too, of whether it's just like, no, I don't want to go there for lunch, or hey, I need you to do this, or you're sitting a little too close to me. like just the
Yeah.
everyday kinds of ways to set boundaries and develop health in relationships, I think is a really important tool.
Yeah. That's another tough one. There's that shame response that
Oh,
happens. Yeah.
100%. There's shame, and then there's also defensiveness, and I think at the same time that we want to teach girls how to give feedback and stand up for themselves, we also need to teach them that you're going to hear it too, and it doesn't
Yeah.
always feel great, and not everyone's going to like you, and that's
Right.
okay.
And that's okay.
Do you like everybody? You know, you don't like everybody, and
Definitely
everybody
not.
doesn't like you.
Well, if there was one message you could give to every girl about confidence, resilience, and leadership, what would it be?
That's I mean, I think I would say that the world needs you exactly like you are. The world needs your beliefs, your perspectives, your voice, your confidence, your competence, your kindness, your creativity, your
Mhm.
athletic. The world needs you just as you are. And being who you are and creating the best version of yourself is
Yeah.
is your full-time job, right?
Yeah.
And that not changing who you are for somebody else's approval or admiration
Yeah.
or love, but that who you are is exactly what the world needs right now.
Yeah. Well, I like to end the show asking everybody, what's your Everest? What's next on the horizon for you? Any big ambitions or climbs ahead?
Well, I think for this work, at Rocks, we've been growing for 15 years, and we have Rocks programs. We will have Rocks programs in every state this year, which
Awesome.
for me is such a milestone. But what I know is that we are barely scratching the surface
Yeah.
of impacting and meeting girls' needs right now. And I think if we take our foot off the gas even a little bit, we will move backwards faster than we ever could have thought possible. And so
Right.
I think what's next for me is ensuring that we have the opportunity for access and education for as many girls in this country and beyond that we can. I want every girl to have the chance to learn more about herself and who she can become. I want every girl to have a supportive environment that with adults who invest in her and care for her, and I want every girl regardless of her circumstances to be able to develop and actualize her full potential. And so for us, it's about how we continue to scale faster
Yeah.
and become more accessible for all of the girls that need us most.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. I sure hope a Rocks program comes to my community soon. I'd be very excited to see that happen.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
too. I would too. And if there's
Yeah.
folks who are interested in learning more about how Rocks programs
Yeah.
operate,
I would love that.
and
Yeah.
how they get started and what communities we're in, they can certainly come to our website. You could see where programs are operating, but reach out to our team because we happily walk alongside folks to determine how to get programs started, how to get them funded, how to get girls involved, and that makes us so happy.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, Lisa. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.